right, let's play around with this template for one more lesson, and then we'll move on to something else. So a couple of things I can see here. I'm on the home page, and if I scroll down, you'll see this area here. But then if I go to the About page, I see the same thing. Okay, why don't we remove that? Next, if we scroll down, we have the footer here, and that's repeated for every single view. Well, if that's the case, it should really be in the layout file, right? So let's get started. I'm going to go to the welcome page, and sure enough, all this section here, welcome to our website, that corresponds to this. So it sounds like maybe all we care about for the home page is this banner, at least for our demo. So I'm going to highlight all of this and delete it, and that only leaves us with the footer. So if I come back and refresh, here's our home page, and then I can switch to About Us. Okay, great. Next, the footer there, this corresponds to this. And you'll see I repeat it here, and then if I go to About, the same thing occurs again. Okay, let's remove it in both locations. All right, and now if I refresh, it's gone. And we can bring it back in the layout file. And we should be able to do it right here below the content. All right, come back, refresh, and now it's back, but we're not repeating it for every single view. Okay, so now we can see the welcome page. We don't even have to bother with content. We just have that header section, and the About page has only the information that it requires. Let's now talk about scripts and style sheets. You may have noticed that I stored our CSS here in the public directory. However, in the resources directory, we also see things like JavaScript and Sass. So what's going on here? If you have some JavaScript, does it go in the resources directory or does it go in the public directory? And the answer is, it depends on if you have a build process. So let's imagine you're writing vanilla CSS and vanilla JavaScript. All right, throw all of that in the public directory and be done with it. However, if you are using a preprocessor like Sass or Less or Stylus, well, you need an intermediate step, right? You need something that compiles those files down to raw CSS or vanilla CSS. And the same is going to be true for your JavaScript. Are you using NPM? Are you pulling in Vue? Are you importing modules? Well, if that's the case, you might need a build process. You might be using Gulp or you might be using Webpack. So what happens is the files you store here are ultimately compiled down to your public directory. And these files are served to the browser. Okay, so take a look at this. We're going to scroll down and you'll see this webpack.mix.js file. So Laravel comes with Webpack support out of the box. But on top of that, we provide a tool called Laravel Mix, which is sort of a wrapper around Webpack to make the common steps you might need really easy to accomplish. So let's take a look. For mix.js, you give it two arguments, an entry point and an output directory. Now this entry point can pull in Vue, it can require modules, you can write in the latest and greatest that ECMAScript has to offer. And ultimately, all of that, as part of your build process using Webpack, will be compiled to the public JS directory. Next, we're saying we want Sass compilation. Here's where my Sass entry point is, and here's the output directory. So if you take a look at this, resources, Sass, and sure enough, here's a file. So let's say primary is red, just to give you a quick example, and the body color is that primary. All right, so here we are writing Sass, and we want to compile it down. So if I switch back, you can modify this however you want, but we're going to start with simple Sass compilation, like so. Now, how do we execute this, though? Well, take a look at your package.json directory. This declares all Node and NPM dependencies. Here's the ones we need out of the box, and then here are some scripts you can execute. All right, so let's try this out. Now, out of the box, we have these dependencies, but they haven't yet been installed. We can install them by pulling in Node and NPM. Now you can run npm-v to see which version you have. And if you don't see anything, go to nodejs.org and you can install it in 3 seconds. Okay, so I'm going to install all of my dependencies that have been declared here. And it should take maybe a minute. Those have now been installed and they are placed in your Node modules directory. Mostly though, you don't even need to look at that folder. The next step is to compile. So I can run this script, npm run, and then the key you see here. Let's try it, npm run dev. And looks like we have a Sass compilation error. It expected a semicolon. All right, let's come back. And there we go. We forgot a semicolon. So let's give it another shot. I will hit up one time to scroll to my previous command and then rerun that. Okay, so it compiled that down to my CSS directory. We should be able to see that now here, public CSS, and here is your compiled file. But now it is a little annoying. Every time I change this, I'd have to rerun it, let it compile, and then reload the browser, right? Instead, you can boot up your watch command, and this will be your general workflow. Run npm run watch, and now it'll keep an eye on those files for changes. So for example, if we change this to black and save it, if I switch back, it will immediately compile again. And there we go. Let's change it to blue, and it automatically compiles down. Now, when you're done working, you may hit Control-C to close that out. Okay, let's go back, webpack.mix.js. Now for this template, we don't have any JavaScript functionality, but if we did, you'd want to pull this in. Mix.js, you provide your entry point, and Laravel gives you a little bit out of the box. We have a bootstrap file. Maybe you want some Lodash helpers. Maybe you want Axios for performing Ajax requests, or maybe you can delete it all. It depends on the project. But anyways, if we kept that and we compile it again, there we go. Now these files have been compiled. So at this point, the only remaining step is to import them, and you can do it however you wish. If you want to put it at the bottom, you could say /js/app.js, and then up in your header, maybe you could link to it like so. CSS app.css. Alternatively, there's a mix helper function that you could use as well, and this becomes especially handy once you start versioning your assets. But that's a little down the line. If you'd like to get a head start, you could research Laravel Mix on the Laracast website. We have a full series dedicated to it that will show you all the ins and outs. But for now, this basic workflow should get you started. So for any new project, you'd run npm install, and then you would visit your webpack.mix.js file and configure this however you want. So for example, maybe you don't want Sass, but you want less support. All right, we'll take care of that for you. Or maybe you want React support, or maybe you want to use browser sync, or maybe you need to combine some files. There's a lot of things available to you. And again, research Laravel Mix to review the full documentation.